For decades, Seattle made a strange trade. It turned its back on one of the most beautiful waterfronts in America and replaced it with a wall of concrete and noise. The Alaskan Way Viaduct wasn't just a highway, it was a barrier, a towering structure that cut the city off from Elliott Bay, physically, visually, and psychologically. People drove over the water every day, but barely experienced it. And over time, that disconnect became normal. Generations grew up thinking this was just how Seattle worked: water on one side, city on the other, and a loud, aging highway in between. But here's the part almost no one expected. Tearing that wall down wouldn't just fix a traffic problem. It would trigger the biggest transformation Seattle has attempted since the tech boom reshaped its skyline. And once it started, there was no going back. The turning point didn't come from a bold vision. It came from fear. In 2001, the Nisqually earthquake shook Seattle, hard enough to expose a quiet danger hiding in plain sight. The viaduct, already aging, already controversial, suffered real damage. Not enough to collapse, but enough to raise a terrifying question. What happens next time? Engineers began warning that the structure was vulnerable, not just inconvenient, dangerous. And below it, the seawall protecting the shoreline was also deteriorating, another hidden risk that could fail under pressure. Suddenly, this wasn't about traffic anymore. It was about public safety in the middle of a growing city. But solving it created a new problem, because there was no easy answer. Tear it down? You lose a major transportation artery. Replace it? You spend billions and disrupt the city for years. Tunnel it? That opens the door to massive cost overruns and engineering risks. And that's exactly what happened. What followed wasn't a clean decision. It was a decade-long battle over money, design, and the future of Seattle itself. By the time leaders finally chose a path, the project had already become something much bigger than a highway replacement. It had become a gamble on the city's future. If you're interested, the ending might actually surprise you. At first, this was supposed to be simple. Take down the old highway, build something new, keep traffic moving. That was the plan. But the moment Seattle removed the viaduct, everything changed. Because for the first time in generations, the city could actually see its own waterfront. No concrete overhead, no constant noise, just open views of Elliott Bay, ferries cutting across the water, mountains sitting on the horizon, and a shoreline that suddenly felt valuable again. And that created a problem, because once people saw what had been hidden for so long, rebuilding a highway in the same place no longer made sense. So the question shifted, not what replaces the viaduct, but what should this entire space become? That one shift turned a transportation project into something much bigger. Instead of rebuilding what was there, Seattle started reimagining everything along its edge. The plan expanded into a massive, multi-layered transformation, one that would unfold over more than a decade. Traffic would move underground through a new tunnel. The surface would be rebuilt for slower streets, pedestrians, and public life. And along the water, an entirely new environment would take shape. Roughly 20 acres of parks, promenades, bike paths, and open gathering spaces designed to bring people back. But the most important change wasn't what was added, it was what was reconnected. For decades, downtown sat above the waterfront, separated by elevation and infrastructure. Now, new pathways, overlooks, and pedestrian links began stitching the city back together, physically reconnecting streets to the shoreline. This wasn't just construction, it was a complete reset of how Seattle meets the water. By the time construction was underway, Seattle had a new problem, and it had nothing to do with the viaduct. The city that had exploded during the tech boom, powered by companies like Amazon and Microsoft, was suddenly facing a very different reality. Downtown was changing, fast. Office towers that once filled up every morning were now sitting half empty. Remote work didn't just dent demand, it rewired daily life. Foot traffic dropped. Restaurants lost their lunch crowds. Small businesses that depended on office workers started disappearing. Entire parts of downtown felt quieter than they had in decades, and for the first time in years, Seattle's growth didn't feel guaranteed. That's when the waterfront project took on a completely different role. It stopped being just a fix for old infrastructure and became a tool for the city's future. Because if people weren't coming downtown for work anymore, the city needed a new reason to bring them back. So leaders began treating the waterfront like a magnet, a place designed to pull in locals, tourists, families, events, activity at all hours, not just during the workday. A space that could stay alive in the evenings, on weekends, and during seasons when office demand disappears. Because unlike office buildings, public spaces don't rely on routine. They rely on experience, views, movement, energy, a reason to stay longer than planned. If it works, the waterfront doesn't just look good, it changes behavior, and that's why the stakes became so much higher. This project doesn't just have to impress people, it has to bring a city back to life. What made this project so difficult wasn't just its size, it was where it had to happen, right along the edge of the city on unstable ground, next to active roads, ferry routes, utilities, and aging infrastructure that couldn't simply be shut off and replaced overnight. Seattle wasn't building on empty land, it was rebuilding itself in motion. At the center of it all was the tunnel, designed to take traffic underground and free up the surface. A massive boring machine would dig beneath the city, carving out a new route while everything above kept functioning. And for a while, it worked, until it didn't. The machine stalled, progress slowed, costs climbed. What was supposed to be a clean solution started turning into a public headache, fueling doubts about whether the entire plan was too ambitious. But the tunnel was only one piece. Above ground, crews were dealing with an even more complicated challenge, holding the shoreline together while rebuilding it. The old seawall had to be replaced without triggering damage to the waterfront or nearby structures. At the same time, streets were being redesigned, utilities relocated, and new public spaces constructed, all in tight, overlapping phases. Nothing could fail, because everything was connected. And then there was the final layer, the part people would actually see. Projects like Overlook Walk weren't just aesthetic features, they were structural links, physically reconnecting steep downtown streets to the waterfront below, bridging gaps that had existed for generations. This wasn't just engineering, it was coordination at a scale where one delay could ripple across the entire system. And for years, it did, which is what made the final outcome feel so uncertain, right up until the moment it finally started to come together. For years, this project felt endless. Construction zones, detours, noise, delays that made it hard to picture what the final result would even look like. And then, almost quietly, it started to come together. Paths opened, views widened, spaces that had been blocked off for over a decade suddenly became accessible again, and people showed up, not for a grand promise, but for what was finally real. A continuous stretch of waterfront where you could actually walk without interruption. Open plazas where there used to be traffic lanes, places to sit, gather, and watch the water instead of rushing past it. Then came the turning point, the official opening of Waterfront Park in 2025. That was the moment the project stopped being an idea and became part of the city. And what people saw wasn't just a nicer shoreline. It was a completely different experience of Seattle. The noise was gone. The barrier was gone. The distance between downtown and the water, gone. In its place was something the city hadn't truly had in generations. Access, direct, simple, everyday access to the waterfront, and that changed how people moved, where they spent time, and how they experienced the city itself. But even then, one question still lingered. Was this enough? Even now, there's a risk no design can solve, because building a beautiful place doesn't guarantee people will come. Seattle's deeper challenges didn't disappear when the viaduct came down. Downtown is still dealing with high office vacancy, shifting work habits, and ongoing concerns around affordability and street activity. And those forces matter more than any park ever could. If foot traffic doesn't return in a meaningful way, the waterfront could struggle to reach its full potential. Not empty, but not as alive as it was meant to be. There's also a bigger question beneath it all. Who is this space really for? If it becomes more of a tourist destination than a local one, it risks losing the everyday energy that makes great public spaces work. Because in the end, this project isn't judged by how it looks, it's judged by how it lives. Seattle already proved it could grow fast. That was the tech boom. But this project is about something different. It's about what happens after the growth. Instead of building higher, this is Seattle trying to build better, reconnecting its city, reshaping how people move, and redefining what downtown is actually for. Not just work, not just traffic, but experience. And whether this works or not will decide something much bigger than a waterfront. It will decide if Seattle can reinvent itself when the old version of the city no longer fits.